Thanks so much for coming out. So this panel today is the future of branded content, just in case you were looking for a different panel. We're going to be talking about the brand as publisher model. It's increasingly becoming the expectation for marketers and brand teams to create more and more content than ever before. Meanwhile, the landscape has changed a lot. There's a lot of vendors providing different options for content creation. Brands are taking content creation in-house. Agencies are, kind of adapting to different roles as publishers are collaborating with brands more and more. So this session is going to talk a bit about the challenges and opportunities associated with all these different options and where everything is headed. And we'll talk a bit about how brands grow an audience and keep up with the demand for content. Our panelists will all be moderating. I'm Brennan Gann, founder of Epic Signal. We work with Fortune 500 brands in digital video, helping them grow their own presence, as well as collaborating with digital celebrities and digital influencers on the platforms. We've also got, or actually, why don't I let everybody introduce themselves? Jason, do you want to
Yeah,
start?
sure. Hi, I'm Jason Harris. I run an agency called Mechanism, and our point of view from branded content is going to be focused from the agency standpoint.
Hey everyone, my name is Greg Rivera. I'm with Microsoft, and I head up a team within our Ad Solutions group. And we're typically engaged anytime a brand or an advertiser wants to develop some type of custom experience that typically involves content or might also involve leveraging some of our unique technology or innovations to create a more differentiated content experience for our brand.
Hi everybody, I'm Jeremy Levine. I run the digital sales group at Live Nation. So work with brands and agencies across the country. More and more the focus of media programs is the content itself. So as a publisher we're doing more content for our own, but a lot of branded content as part of media programs.
And I'm James Dell. I'm the VP of Programming at Gawker Media. For those of you who don't know Gawker, we publish a bunch of different blogs like Gawker Gizmodo, Jezebel, IO9, Deadspin, sites like that. Programming at Gawker is basically our code word for pushing into video content. Traditionally, we were just blogs, and now we're building out an entire kind of production team, working with both editorial and brand partners to create content. And before I was doing that, I was actually the head of studio at Gawker, which was Gawker's in-house content creation team. So like a lot of the guys here, I was working directly with brands to figure out what kind of content they wanted to create, and then help them build it with either people we had in-house or contracting with outside partners, production agencies, things like that.
Awesome. So I think to start things off, we can maybe start with some broad questions, and then I can pick on everybody individually. But we're talking about the future of branded content. I think that's a good jumping off point. How do you define branded content, and what's the future of it? James, do you want to start on that end? We'll go this way.
I think the future of branded content actually looks a lot like the past of branded content, to be completely honest. I'm kind of a history junkie, so I studied like media in college and stuff. So I think if you look at the models that radio and TV kind of forged back in the 40s and 50s, as far as we know our audiences are there, we know they're watching content, how can we get the money and the funding to create that content for them? Let's find a brand partner to create some content that the audience is really going to like. That was branded content all the way back then. Now that we're on the internet and the banner ad has finally kind of had its death rattle, even though it took us 20 years to get there, brands are now trying to figure out what are the things we could do on the internet and also in real life with experiential stuff to actually create great content experiences. So I think brands are they're looking at our spaces now and thinking, how can we do work that people are going to pay attention to, as opposed to just create commercials that we sandwich in between the work. So I think that's where we're going, but it's also, it looks a lot like where we've been, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would build on what James is saying. It's a little bit back to the future with P&G back in the 50s. with a soap opera, right? And the housewife turns to the camera with the tide, right? And that was sort of branded entertainment, right? So it's become a lot more sophisticated. But I think the future, the whole sector is only going to get bigger and bigger. You know, there's so many marketing messages. You know, DVRs, people are skipping through their messages. So the smarter brands are really approaching it as a new advertising platform, right? If we can get our product and core brand messaging, brand DNA across in an entertaining environment, that's arguably going to do more for us to connect with consumers than a 30-second spot, a 15-second spot, a print ad, a banner ad. So I look at it as building from the past in terms of whether you call it native advertising, brand entertainment, sponsored content. When there is that sort of synergy between a brand, an agency, and a publisher to create something that really is entertaining and can also get the point across to the consumer, I think that's the direction you're going to see more and more brands really, you know, start to seriously get into this world over the next couple of years.
Is everybody still on?
Hello.
Hot mics.
I think we're here.
That was a powerful point.
Yeah. Wait, that's one more time. All right. So I'll add a slight twist and perspective on the future of branded content because I think I would agree with what my colleagues have said so far. And I do believe, honestly, that content is king. It always will be king. I don't think that's ever going to change. And that may sound a little interesting coming from the guy up here that's coming from a company that kind of built their business on technology. But I honestly do believe that content is king. That said, I think some brands are getting a lot smarter about also taking advantage of the opportunities that technology and innovation offers branded content creators to enhance that experience and take it beyond just the traditional passive content consumption experience. So specifically what I'm talking about is when a brand is recognizes that not only are they creating content or starting to look like, you know, a publisher, but they're also taking advantage of whatever native or inherent or unique capabilities are available to them in whatever environments they're distributing that content on. So one of the areas that we spend a lot of time on from a content distribution standpoint is Xbox. And Xbox is a great platform for distributing video. There's a huge audience there that loves watching content, but it also has some cool capabilities built in, such as that Kinect sensor, or the fact that there's typically a two-way experience going on because a lot of the audience is typically playing games on that platform, and they're used to interacting with content. So the brands that are doing it best are the ones that recognize that that capability is there. They recognize that the audience is used to engaging in that type of behavior, and they take incredibly high quality content and make it that much better by integrating things like interactive video or voice or gesture capabilities into a really interesting branded content experience. So I think we're going to see more of that in the future.
So branded content and technology
Kind of.
together, kind of?
Yeah, should I have done this?
No. Yeah, so
work for me.
I would say that you know, I'm biased because I'm from the agency standpoint, but I think I don't think it's back to the future where you're inserting your brand into properties, entertaining properties that already exist. I think it's much more about finding what your brand stands for, how you tell a story well that connects with the audience, but you do that almost on your own. And I'd say the best example of this, which a lot of brands obviously can't do, would be something like the Lego movie, which is essentially a 2-hour commercial for Legos with a story, with a revenue stream, without needing, you know, another platform to live on. That's just a good example of taking the assets of a brand and creating content around it, from my standpoint. Not that we did the Lego movie, but it'd be awesome if we did. What do you think the future is, Brendan?
That's for me.
Oh, okay.
I'm so one more broad question for everybody. It's interesting. So we've got agencies and publishers, and Live Nation. You're kind of, I mean, I know you said you're a publisher, but you're kind of like an interesting.
A little bit of everything.
Yeah, a little bit of everything. And so, you know, with publishers creating content for brands, what role do the different vendors play in terms of kind of the relationship with the brand, the agency, and what are some how do the different approaches differ from, an agency comes at it one way, a publisher who's creating content every day, is leveraging their platform. What are the inherent differences and what are some of the pros and cons that come from the different angles? Jason, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think from the agency angle, the real value, or kind of the only value agencies offer brands, are building what they stand for in the long term and coming up with what the brand, identifying what the brand is going to represent to the audience and how to tell their story consistently across different platforms over time to build brand equity. And an agency partner can really do that. And I think an agency working with a client, some clients are really great at doing it on their own. Most clients are really poor at doing it on their own because they don't have an outside perspective of what the audience is looking for because they're so in it every day. And so I think partnering with the client and the agency on helping to tell that brand story and then working with publishers, platforms, et cetera, on one-off experiences that ladder up to an overall brand message or story, I think that plays nicely. And I think when a brand starts to do a lot of random things, it might be exciting for a short period of time, but it may not. It may be schizophrenic to the audience and what you're trying to communicate from a brand standpoint.
Cool. So from a partnership perspective, one of the things that's kind of inherent in the DNA of the company that I work for is just the fact that we've been doing business through partnerships since the company first started. So that's nothing new to us, and it actually works very good for the business that I'm involved in because we don't produce content in-house. We don't have any intention or aspirations of becoming a media or creative agency. Essentially what we are is we have a number of very interesting platforms for distributing content. We have a highly engaged audience across those platforms, and then we have a huge roster of partners. Agency partners that are maybe typically acting as our clients, but actually sometimes we'll go to an agency to do work on our behalf for another one of our clients. We obviously have the advertisers or the brands that are originating the opportunity. And then since we don't produce content in-house, we're typically working with external production or content creators that will actually produce that content, but have been doing it with us for years so they know the right way to produce content that's going to work best for the brand, but also work really well in the environments that we have to offer, such as MSN or Windows or Skype or Xbox, et cetera. So partnership is key for us. I don't see that changing anytime soon. And I think what's interesting is we're just exploring new models where in some cases a brand or an agency already has the content created. So we're simply figuring out the right way to find their audience across our environments and maybe overlay some interesting capabilities that we could bring to the table by combining technology and content. In other cases, brands or agencies are coming to us without content already. So then we will engage one of our content creation partners to create that. So there's a lot of models you're seeing out there, but I don't see this branded content stuff happening without a lot of different partners and collaborations going on together. Right? There really aren't any true one-stop shops, in my opinion.
So do you see yourself as more of like a platform and you guys have expertise and you pull in appropriate partners as needed?
Absolutely, yeah. Cool. That's definitely the way that we're approaching it right now.
So yeah, to build on what's been said, I think partnership's really important. And I think when you look at the publisher, the client, and the agency, each one serves a really important role, right, obviously. And I think it's about having each entity concentrate on what their core competency or expertise is and having a trust amongst that three to create the best possible piece of content, right? So the brand obviously knows the product best. The agency, making generalizations, right? The agency is going to be able to translate those product attributes into a marketing message, and then the publisher is going to be the expert on their, vertical, right? So for Live Nation, for music, right? So it's a stretch for a brand or an agency to say, we know how to do music better than you do. Yeah. They certainly know their product better than us, and they might know the marketing mechanisms, the language, the DNA that they want to come across the consumer. But I think it's the publisher, right? Whether it's entertainment, sports, music, they're the ones who are expert in that category, right? So it really is incumbent upon having that partnership amongst the three to create something that's going to check all the boxes and really recognize what needs to happen to move the brand forward.
Again, he loves it.
I didn't see him move that time.
Every time. Bang, done. I'll echo that, and I won't go too long into it, but I think alignment is key when you're trying to do this kind of work, because you could have 24 people working on a project, and that might be on the low end, and everyone has their own perspective. You have the PR team, you have the marketing team, you have the agency side, the media side, the creative side, the publisher side, the actual talent itself. And if you don't have any kind of alignment, you wind up with someone trying to pull a power play because the PR agency doesn't really like the media agency, and so now they're going to argue with each other. And as a publisher, you just kind of have to sit back and let those things happen. But every single time that goes down, the work winds up suffering, and the story is not told in the most effective way. And I think that's a new world for a lot of these agencies that have traditionally been able to exist in their own silos and really PR does PR, and that's all they have to think about. But now all of this stuff, technology, PR, marketing, revenue, all of these things are coming together now in a way that you can't have these silos anymore. Everyone needs to learn how to play together.
Cool.
And I would just, one thing I would say to what James said is I think everyone's sort of going after the same, it's all converging. And ideas are still an endangered species, so you still have to have, it's sort of like whoever has the best idea.
Yeah.
That sort of is going to be the lead dog, and it can come from a publisher, an agency, a PR company, whatever. But it still comes down to who's got the killer idea, and then everyone sort of has to get on board with that idea.
Totally agree.
Is really what it comes down to.
Well, drafting off of that, we were talking a bit a couple days ago when we were planning this call, and James made the comment. We as publishers know what's going to work. We understand what's going to kind of engage the audience best. But isn't there also a certain conflict of interest at times? I think a great example is, we saw, BuzzFeed got a bunch of flack for, pulling down articles. They pulled down a handful of articles that were not very complimentary of Axe and I think a couple Unilever brands. You guys got in a bit of trouble with Coca-Cola, I'm sure.
Who's that?
Do you want to explain it?
I'm not allowed to talk about brands. I got a very strict.
You can talk about it.
All right, I'll talk about it.
Yeah, you talk about it. It's fine. I don't know what you're talking about.
So, Gawker, let's see, Coca-Cola ran a campaign during the Super Bowl where you could tweet something with, what was the hashtag?
Like make happiness or something.
Make happiness. And they compiled all the tweets into cute little photos that people were submitting. And one of the editors at Gawker got the bright idea of tweeting Mein Kampf with the hashtag, and then suddenly there was images, beautiful, cute images with lines from Mein Kampf in there. Yeah. And that blew up. That was a huge story and kind of an egg on the face of Coca-Cola to a certain extent. But I imagine on your end, you would have loved to work with Coca-Cola. So how do you guys wrestle with those types of situations? You know how to get headlines. That was huge.
Yep.
But
it got a great PR for Coca-Cola because it actually made Coca-Cola look like they were being bullied, which is kind of amazing to consider when you think that Coca-Cola is a multi-billion-dollar sugar water company.
Yeah.
This is where I get in trouble every single time we do these things, but it's fine. I'll just keep going. Nobody tweet. Impossible ask. But seriously, I think Coca-Cola is one of those brands where their marketing message, and Jason nailed it before, right? It's about telling your brand story. And I think every brand has its own story, and every brand is able to kind of get out there and create the real-life version of themselves in the world through advertising and experiential and things like that. I think with certain brands, their marketing message is so far removed from the reality of what their product is and how they run their business that it's still contingent on publishers like Gawker and others to go out and say, this is kind of bullshit. And Coca-Cola doesn't actually really create happiness as much as it creates obesity and third world country like problems and stuff. And I apologize if anyone here works with Coca-Cola. But they are being sued, or actually there's a murder case in South America that Coca-Cola like executives are being implicated in. And like that's not happy. Like it had to do with the business. Look it up online. I don't have the details on it, but I swore I wouldn't talk about this. But these are the kinds of things where when a brand is not honest with itself and is not putting out a message that consumers believe in, it's easy to call them on their bullshit. And actually, a lot of consumers saw that campaign, and they were making fun of it just as much as we were by saying like, "Wow, Coca-Cola, like tweeting is really going to make the world a happier place." So I think certain brands Gawker could work with very easily, and our thing is all about truth and honesty and no bullshit. There are certain brands that just for whatever reason they can't go out into the world and work with a publisher that says that they're honest and then say something that's totally dishonest. So for us, that becomes a real problem in trying to figure it out, but that's why we have the church and state line. Editorial has no understanding of the world that the business world lives in.
Do you want to comment on how church and state is within Gawker versus
yeah.
one of the other publishers?
Yeah, I mean, so if you look at like a Gawker versus like a BuzzFeed, for example, right? BuzzFeed just got in a lot of trouble for taking down that Dove post. We've never taken a post down, and I've been on the advertising side at Gawker for 7 years now, and there have been countless Coca-Colas in my time there where, you know, maybe it's a new smartphone comes out and the editor of Gizmodo just doesn't think it's all that hot, and they say so, and that's their editorial right to do. It might lose us, you know, 6-7 figures in deals that we had pending, and that's a frustrating thing for us. But at the end of the day, the media is actually more important to us than the advertising revenue that comes in, and that's different for a lot of publications. I think like a BuzzFeed has to actually, they have investors, they have people looking at the bottom line, trying to make it a like very profitable advertising heavy business. We are more concerned with creating the best user experience for our audience, which when we do find a brand that wants to work with us, they're able to come in and say things much more honestly and much more openly, and our readers actually trust it because they know we're not lying to them.
Cool. Does anybody want to talk about, I mean, you guys are platforms and publishers. I imagine it's very different than Gawker.
You guys ever piss off any brands?
Yeah. You guys face any different, you know, similar challenges?
Do it all the time.
Or want to comment on it?
Not really on our side, I mean, based on the kind of content we're doing,
Yeah.
right? It's not as much brand.
Music is
focused.
relatively
That's
tame
same.
by comparison.
Why do you think I'm trying to start a music
neutral.
vertical?
We're very neutral.
Yeah. Cool, cool. Well, you know, we're talking, you know, this is all about the future branded content, and a lot of, you know, money is what's going to fund the future branded content. And one thing we were talking about a bit at the end of our call when we were all touching base was that there's this trend, I mean, it's been happening for quite some time where most brands still have a traditional 80-20 split in their ad dollars where 20% goes to the creative and production, then 80% goes to media. The problem is that split has basically been in place for, you know, 50, 60, 70 years or whatever, and hasn't necessarily adapted to today where oftentimes, you know, content is king, and you want more content, you don't want to, you know, pay for a bunch more banner ads. And so what's happening is, you know, publishers and platforms are basically saying, hey, well, you know, give us your money from the media budget, and not only are we going to help distribute your message, but we'll also help collaborate with you and create content. What are you guys' thoughts on that? Do you see that as an opportunity? How are you guys adapting to this trend? Is this something you are seeing? You want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, from an agency standpoint, we see it all the time, where, you know, they play, you know, brands have working and non-working dollars, and they need working dollars, which is eyeballs and media and impressions. And so if they can, on paper, it makes no logical sense to me, but on paper, they can push it to working dollars. The publisher can throw in, oh yeah, well, we'll give you $200K free of, you know, media if you do a big buy, and we'll use that 200 to create content. And I think it sounds good, and the numbers look good, and, you know, the publishers can make the numbers look good. But I don't know that having, you know, people that aren't experts in crafting a brand message just crap out content on behalf of a brand because it's part of a media buy. Sometimes it's good, but most times it's it's sort of it's there and then it's gone. It doesn't add up to a longer message.
And I think that's where the collaboration comes in, because that's a good point. And I think even if it is, so we see on the media side, publishing side, huge trend towards working dollars, right? So we're going to make this media commitment to you. With it, we want X, right? And it's sort of, I come from the print world way back. It's no different than merchandising, right? Buy a schedule, we're going to throw you a party, right? So it's the same parallel. And I think those publishers who are the most nimble and fluid, and we hear it every day. Ultimately, we want to make it as easy for the agency client to work with us, right? So given our assets, right, what can we bring to bear that's going to make the most financial sense and marketing sense? But I think the really good point is it's a mistake for the publisher to think they know the brand better than the brand does. So I think the smarter publishers who will do a deal like that, and I would include us in this, we want to engage with the agency, the multiple agencies and the brand, even if it's part of a media buy, right? You guys are the experts on your brand, right? You're the experts on who your consumer is. Let's get in a room together. We can fund this through media, create it, produce it, distribute it, but it's really still important for everyone to be engaged in the process.
And I think it's just the reality of what's going on right now. A lot of publishers are getting very aggressive with these types of models. It's the model that we use as well. And I think it really depends on specifically what the brand is looking to accomplish, because there could be a few different approaches to take with this. Right? If a brand is really more interested in having their brand more prominently featured within whatever content's being created, and they're trying to tell their brand story a little bit more directly, which could still be done well and can still be entertaining, then typically what happens is, there's much more of a tighter collaboration going on, where the agency, the creative agency, the brand itself would be working with us and whatever content creator that we are bringing in to help create that content. The flip side of that is we still have that church and state of editorial and advertising and advertorial. So what you see is this balancing act of the more emphasis you see in content of a brand, the less that an editorial staff is frankly going to consider that to be true editorially in nature. And what you sacrifice there is you might have a higher brand presence within your content. You're probably going to sacrifice the amount of promotion that you're willing to get or you're going to get organically because of that. On the flip side, if a brand's coming in and they just want to be aligned with content that stays true to the themes or the tone or the voice of their brand, but they don't necessarily need their products or brands to be front and center in that content, and they're willing to let an editorial team to kind of take more of that creative control, they're giving up maybe some of that brand presence in the content, but they're probably going to benefit in a lot more organic promotion, audience, volume from that particular publisher, because that publisher is going to deem that content to be more editorial in nature. So there's really that balancing act that's going on, and every brand, or depending on a campaign by campaign basis, they might, want to, lean one way or the other at any given time. So it really depends on the specific brand, what they're trying to achieve, and what the objectives of that specific campaign are.
I would totally agree with everything that was just said. I mean, if you try to create branded content in that vacuum, you are going to wind up with crummy content. But I also think that some of the best campaigns we've ever done was where the brand actually they gave us like guidelines or guardrails, if you will, and they said, okay, we want you talking about cars, and we're a car company, but talk about kind of things you go to with cars, and basically give us a list of do's and don'ts. Where can we go with this content? And then we bring in, when we were on the studio side, because again, our editors don't touch any of this content, we would hire people who were professional writers, understood the car world really well. We work with a company called Contently, actually, that has like a huge database of like great writers, journalists who are basically looking for this kind of work. And we'll go through that database and we'll say, oh, this guy's a car guy. He totally understands where this brand is trying to create content. We'll bring that person in. We'll have a meeting with the brand, with the creative agency, and then figure out, okay, how can we create this content in such a way that the brand doesn't have to approve every single word like they were approving, the copy in a print ad, but we know that every piece of content that's going to come out is going to be really interesting and all about the ethos of the brand that we're trying to talk about.
I think it was earlier this week about, there was a study, or maybe it was last week, that I think Adweek reported on something like 50% of video ads off of YouTube are not actually being watched by people. And you mentioned earlier,
Wow.
people hate banner ads. Yeah, it was crazy. On YouTube, it was significantly higher. You mentioned nobody likes banner ads. A lot of the, you guys' businesses are kind of built on, scale. Is the future going to be more and more of this trend of you guys collaborating with brands in creating custom content, or is there always going to be a place for just basically sheer volume and replicating something at scale, or is everything headed towards branded content and being
Customized.
very custom?
I think it's going to be a balance. I think sponsored content, so pure editorial that is brought to you by a brand, it sort of goes to James' point, right? And a little different because it wasn't your editorial team, but you could be creating, we might be doing a story on touring, right? And that there might be parallels in that to a trucking company, right? For instance, in terms of moving a tour across country. So we might be planning on doing something completely editorial, but it lines up great with what they're doing. So for them to present that and then maybe have ancillary, more brand-focused content hanging off of it, right, is something that can accomplish that. So I don't know that it's an either or. I think some brands want to be front and center. We don't care if it's cheesy. We want that can in front of the camera. Other brands say, listen, we want the softer qualities, the more qualitative versus quantitative to come across. And I think there's ways of having that come across by sponsoring content that's already happening with a publisher versus creating specific branded content.
Yeah, we're seeing a pretty dramatic trend over the last year, and we think it's going to just accelerate even more. And that is this, essentially, from a media buying perspective, bifurcation of the industry, where you're seeing a huge percentage of the industry going to programmatic, which is a topic for another panel, right? But that's something that is actually breathing life into the banner ad. And then you're seeing the other end of the spectrum, where it's high touch, high end, custom content, custom solutions, custom branded experiences. And what you're seeing getting squeezed out is that middle line, which is that more traditional off-the-shelf type sponsorship stuff that you have this big sales force out selling by hand. We're seeing that starting to get squeezed out. So I think what you're going to see is, in my opinion, that trend is going to continue. You're going to see most of the scalable inventory to continue to be sold more and more electronically, but you're going to always have this need to have that high touch, more custom capability. And I think the companies that are going to win are the companies that could offer both of those and recognize that that middle ground is really starting to go away.
That's really interesting. So no one thinks the banner ads are totally going to disappear.
People would have said the same thing about radio in 1952. Like, oh, this whole medium's dead or whatever. It's actually like we've had good success with optimizing our programmatic approach and saying like, okay, you know what? We don't need a whole sales force just selling banner ads. We could have one guy with a computer hooked up to another guy with their computer, and all the computers will figure out this is the most cost-effective way to serve this media. So I don't think it's going to go away, but I do think it is that kind of barbell type thing where you're going to see one side and the other side, and there's opportunity on both sides right now.
Awesome. So who's doing this really, really well? Branded content. Who do you think is the best at it? And then actually, flip side, who's terrible and needs help? And maybe some thoughts on why.
I know we talked about this in our call, and I think we all agree Red Bull is a company who does this really well because it's not about the can of Red Bull. It's about the excitement and the passion and sort of how Red Bull gives you wings, right? And the kind of things that you can accomplish on Red Bull. So I think with every brand who really smartly, they look at it purely as entertainment, right? The guy jumping out of the spaceship or whatever that was, right? I mean, amazing distribution, amazing viewership. Everybody's talking about, did you see that Red Bull video? Did you see that Red Bull video? It was nothing about the product, but it was the brand, right? So I think they're at sort of in my opinion, the top of the class in terms of understanding having something entertaining and authentic, which still gets their brand across without pushing that Red Bull can in a consumer's face.
And then GoPro does it just because they've got the product to do it.
Yep.
So it's
Made
like,
for it.
if they couldn't do it, then they would have some massive problems. I think one thing that blew me away was that the other side, that Honda Civic I think that mirrored content and technology, but simple technology where you on your keyboard you hit R and it would, in the YouTube video, it would show the other side of the story. And I think that is just a great example of something that's right for the brand, tells the story of the product, but it's entertaining, has a little splash of technology, but it doesn't require you to download an app or scan something. That's, I think, the future. Those are hard to come by, but if you can crack ideas like that, I think that's where it's at.
I didn't see that one. Can you explain what it?
Sure. It was for the Civic R. It was like, I don't know, the line was like the other side of R. It's like their sporty version of a Civic. And so it told a linear story from one Civic, and if you hit R, it would be like, it was a father like picking up his kids from school, and then at night he was like some shady mobster guy. And so if you hit R, you could see the shady mobster story, and then hit R again, and he was like the safe dad. And it was showing the attributes of the car, the like wild and safe side of the car.
Okay.
And
But it was like really well shot and really entertaining, and you couldn't believe that you could hit the keyboard and it would change the video.
Yeah, that's cool.
It was great storytelling, and if you watch it all the way to the end, you realize that on the shady side, the father's actually a secret agent undercover, so he's still a good guy at the end.
I should have watched the whole thing.
Completion rate
You were
not there.
turned off by this dad who was moonlighting as a
I
mobster.
got hungry or something.
But what's funny is when we're consulting with clients that maybe don't have a ton of experience doing or developing branded content, there's not really a lot of secrets on how to do it right. It's the same tried and true tactics that traditional entertainment companies use. Right? So it's essentially like three big things that we often focus on. Number one, let's use those same exact tactics that make traditional entertainment entertaining. And that is, strong storytelling, high production quality, recognizable talent, all the tricks that the traditional entertainment creators use. The second thing is integrating a brand authentically, right? And not doing it in a way that is going to turn into, that next Gawker post, right? That you want to avoid. And then the third one, which is probably the least obvious one, is recognize the audience of the environment that your content is going to end up in. And as we've been talking about a couple examples, I love the Honda example we just talked about. If there's some interesting and unique capabilities inherent in that environment that audience will definitely adopt or readily take advantage of, leverage that to make that experience better. Red Bull and GoPro are great examples of companies that are just doing it great on an ongoing basis. One specific example of a brand we worked with last year, and maybe this is kind of cheating because they're actually an entertainment company, but I'll use it anyway. Paramount, when they released the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film last summer, they came to us and said they wanted to do something really cool with branded content, but not just straight video because that's what they do. So what we actually did with them is we created branded content in the form of an actual Kinect gesture-enabled game on Xbox. And we used the same kind of game mechanic of Fruit Ninja, where you were waving your hands around to kind of slice, fruit in half and that kind of thing. But this time it was actually you were being one of the Ninja Turtles and you were entering the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles training lair, right? It was a downloadable game. It got downloaded and played like crazy. It appealed to a very broad audience. We saw parents playing it with their kids, and most of them had no idea that this was an advertisement until they got to the second level and actually saw the reminder that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was opening in theaters in 2 weeks, right? Other than that, no one knew this was an advertisement. So authentic brand integration, taking advantage of the unique capabilities of an environment that were inherent in that environment. And just, they obviously know strong storytelling because they're a theatrical studio. But, there's a few out there that really hit it well.
Can you do that for deodorant?
Which one?
I don't know. Shampoo?
I think Netflix does it quite well. They're also a content company, but they're not really. They're more of a technology company than a content company. And for a very long time, all of Netflix's advertising was spent doing direct, like pop-ups. Do you remember like the pop-unders? You'd like close your page and there'd be like a big red Netflix ad. So I think they now do it very well with experiential stuff. Like they did when Arrested Development was coming out, they set up like a Bluth banana stand actually a few blocks away from here. And the earned media on that kind of stuff, when you do it well, is huge. And you might spend a couple $1,000 hiring some people and setting up a free chocolate banana stand, but the posts and the articles and news attention that you get from that, that's really good branded content. I think on the negative side, I'm not going to name any brands this time, but I think a lot of brands got really, really excited. But everyone likes a shiny new thing when it comes out. And I think a lot of brands, when branded content first started happening, they were just like, I don't care how I do it, I just need to be doing it. I need a Twitter account, I need a Facebook account, I need an experiential agency, I need all this stuff. And at the end of the day, it's not for every single brand. If your brand has a really great story and a really great product, this kind of marketing is going to do really, really well for you. And you'll get more bang for your buck. But if you're trying to swim against the tide and you're a brand that everyone thinks negatively about, but you're trying to have people tweet positive things about your brand, your Twitter page is just going to be a bunch of haters. And I think that's something that brands now are finally weary of, and they're understanding that maybe we shouldn't just do this work just to say that we did branded content. We should actually think and be strategic and partner with the right agencies, or really think about our product. Like, what is the story we should be telling? So I think that's a big change, which has been a good one. Welcome.
Cool. So everybody dodged the who's doing it bad question. Thank you.
No, thank you.
So we've got 15 minutes. I think maybe we'll ask like one or two more questions, and then if you guys want to start thinking about any questions, I'll open it up to the audience here in a second. But I think you brought up a good point, Jason. Is branded content, is there a place for every brand to do it? Can every brand be cool? Is that the point of branded content? It's great for, GoPro, Red Bull, but should there be cool branded content for toilet paper? Like, what do boring brands do,
Yes.
especially in this space when 50% of people are not watching their display ads?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's room for any brand to do it well. And I think, when, I guess we said deodorant. So like, when you thought of a brand like Old Spice before it became Old Spice, it wasn't exactly a brand that an agency would be dying to go out and get. And so if you can do that for a brand and take risks and define what the brand stands for and communicate that in an interesting way, all of a sudden it's a brand that anyone wants to work on. I think you can do that for toilet paper, tampons, shampoo, you name it. I mean, you can do it really for anything if you're good at coming up with ideas. And I think brands that it takes a lot to really define for a brand and an agency to define what a brand stands for and what the story is that you're going to say over time. But you got to nail that first. And I think barring nailing that, doing some one-off stuff that may seem schizophrenic to get attention can be okay, because at least it gets you recognized and you're in the conversation, you're talking about it. But nailing that sort of long-term view of your story and then letting that dictate how you enter into publishing world and branded content and ads and everything is the way to go. But I think any brand can be a magical brand if it hits on the right story.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely harder for some brands than others, that's for sure. And that's where the power of agencies come into play to use that creativity to get more thoughtful about how to do it for some brands. And there's some brands where it's a lot easier and obvious, as we've been talking about, like the GoPros, Red Bulls, Netflixes of the world. It's going to be easier for them. There's other brands that have products that don't lend themselves necessarily to content, and that's an area where maybe a brand does start to look at what content is a publisher already creating that makes sense to align with versus always creating it from scratch, if it makes sense for the brand. Or can we start looking at using some new things that we never thought of as branded content? So an example of what I'm talking about there, not to be too vague about it, is when we look through our portfolio, we're looking at what are those different innovations that might lend themselves to branded content. And one that we've started working with over the past few months is a technology that we call Bing Predicts. It's a prediction service that we released a little bit over a year ago just to create cool PR and drive more traffic to the Bing search engine. but it's actually working so well in predicting things like the outcomes of sporting events and entertainment shows like Dancing with the Stars and the elections and stuff like that, that now that service is actually being used to predict, everything you could possibly imagine coming up this year. And now we're starting to look at that as not only a set of cool, interesting data, but actual content that might align well with a brand. So, for example, we're working with a financial services firm to create a really cool set of predictions around, the financial markets. And that's interesting content that fits really well with that particular brand. It's content they couldn't necessarily get elsewhere or create on their own because of these sophisticated algorithms we've been able to create based on predictions. And now there's a branded content experience that's being developed based on that content that is very, it's not what you would typically think of when you think of branded content. So it just requires a little bit more thought and creativity when it comes to a brand that maybe doesn't lend itself to branded content.
I'm trying to think of like a great brand that does crappy, crappy work. Like I don't know if it's like Amazon or. I'm trying to think of like brands like a Netflix. It's easy for Netflix and GoPro and all the examples. I'm trying to think of a brand that can't get it right versus the other way.
Which just shows it's not easy
Yeah.
necessarily, right? But I think what it really comes down to in terms of the right brand, the wrong brand, it's all about the entertainment value. It can be a brand, you're like, why would they ever be in the entertainment game? But if you as a consumer are entertained and come across with, oh, that's cool, Cottonelle created that for me, then you might have a higher propensity to buy Cottonelle. It could be the perfect brand that's right in the wheelhouse of entertainment, and you watch like, what did I just spend 30 seconds watching that for? So it comes back to that narrative, the storytelling. If it's not the right storytelling, it can be the best brand in the world, and it can be the worst brand in the world with great storytelling, and it can work.
Maybe a good example is like if you look at
Sorry, that wasn't.
If you look at Chipotle's narrative versus like McDonald's narrative, I think Chipotle figures out how to just tell their story in a way that makes them. I mean, they're pretty much serving up basic food, and
It's actually by the same company.
I think it was.
It used to be.
It used to be.
Yeah, I thought it was.
But that's an example of like a brand resonating with the audience with one truth that they stand for. We're against industrialized farming and we're more organic, whatever. But it's still like it's not pseudo healthy or whatever. But they do branded content really well. And then McDonald's, on the other hand, is trying to invite the audience in and create a dialogue, and it sort of resonates, sort of doesn't. But they don't tell it. They don't tell their story somehow in the right way, I think.
I think the best stories are truths. It's what journalism is made on. It's what art and music is made on. And I think for a long time, advertisers and brands were able to get away with kind of glossing over the truth a little bit. It's, there's the slogan for, I think, is truth well told. And for a long time, the way the advertising industry worked was you had a great product and you told everyone about how great your product was, who you wanted to buy the product. And I think when it became that one-way medium of TV and radio and print, didn't really matter if you were telling the truth. People would buy it anyway. You could say really whatever you wanted and people would buy into it. There was really no way for them to give that feedback. I think the real key, though, is knowing your audience and knowing what is the value I provide and what are my people coming to me for. Delta, for example, if you're a business traveler, you've seen the Delta safety videos, which is a form of content, branded content, if you will, right? They put them up on YouTube, people pass them around, they get millions of views. They're not trying to be cool to every millennial on the planet, and they're not trying to make it seem like they're trying to open a dialogue about safety videos or anything like that, but they know that for someone like me who has to watch that video, up to 8 times in a month, I'm actually enjoying the fact that they're all kind of different, and they put little Easter eggs in there for me because they know I'm a business traveler. I have to sit through this thing over and over and over again. I could recite it by line, but the fact that there's a guy with his nails painted in the 3rd row, that makes me chuckle and laugh. And that's really good branded content, but they're not trying to be the coolest brand in the world. They know who they're talking to.
Cool. I think one thing, before I open it up to the audience, that I heard, which was interesting, was kind of drafting off existing content and trends out there. And I think that there is a lot of opportunity. I actually remember one anecdote on Gawker where one of the editors wrote a tirade against butt wipes.
Yeah.
And then one of the companies, I don't know which one it
Cottonelle.
was, paid to run it as a promoted post on Gawker. It was like the funniest. I don't know.
Yeah,
I thought that
it
really
was,
funny.
well, and then editorial turned around and got all upset because they felt like their editorial was being now co-opted by a toilet company. And so then another editor wrote a post about how actually butt wipes are awesome and you shouldn't use toilet paper, and it became this whole thing. But at the end of the day, Cottonelle got what they wanted out of it. They wanted people talking about what you stick up your butt, and our editors played right into it. So
I think
that's great. That's great toilet.
Post,
That's great toilet humor.
Well, I thought it was interesting on their part. I mean, it was a diatribe against it, and they're like, "Cool, we're gonna promote that and get people talking."
Yeah.
Anybody have any questions? We've got a few more minutes. Go for
How
it.
do you measure today and into the future if the money is well spent, the ROI or the effectiveness?
It's a tough one. I think a lot of it, and more and more we're seeing sort of in the context of the media around the content, is brand lift, right? It's really hard to say, especially if it's one content piece, we drove incremental sales for you. But you can measure perception, right? Sort of traditional A/B testing, saw it, didn't see it. So in our world, a lot of it is at that. But I think that's an interesting area that over time, that research and analytics, data, all these things are really growing. And I think the measurement around branded content and how it's easy to measure click-through, right? Engagement with an ad, you could certainly measure how long someone spends with a piece of entertainment, but ultimately, for now, I think it's about the brand lift that someone gets by engaging with that content, at least from our perspective.
It's also soft right
Yeah.
now. I mean, it's especially if you're doing something that, like the Honda example or whatever it might be, something that's never been done. It's very hard to compare it to something else. So you have to try to prove ROI by squishy numbers like how many people engaged and how many impressions, and this is like a bullshit number of shares which reach this many people, which not really reach this many people, So it's you put numbers together, but I'm surprised that there's still not sort of a standard way of measuring. So everyone comes at it from whatever's going to make them look like it was a success.
Yeah, you're using all the traditional means, the metrics, the brand effectiveness studies, research, et cetera. But there's some other capabilities that are now starting to bubble to the top because of our technical advancements, right? So one specific example for us is because of the fact, in addition to being a media platform and a distribution platform where branded content lives, we also happen to own a search engine. We also happen to own these web browsers that everyone's using out there. So we have the ability to do some interesting things, like, for example, when we're running a branded content program, we can do some A/B test control measurement where we know all of the audience that's actually been exposed and interacted with the branded content. We know the audience that hasn't. And then we could look at the difference in things like searching for that brand's keywords on our search engine, or actually visiting that brand's website, or social pages on Facebook and Twitter, things like that. Because we own those other assets, and we do it in an anonymous way that doesn't violate any privacy or anything like that, but because we own those assets and we actually have the technology to do it, we can start leveraging that to create new measurement techniques for branded content, which traditionally have been very, very hard to measure beyond more attitudinal research type methods.
So you're monitoring social media and
So basically, so in the example I'm giving, the specific thing that's happening is people that have downloaded and installed the Bing toolbar in their browsers, right? They're opting in to have certain levels of tracking because it optimizes their experience. And so anonymously, what we can do is we could actually track what websites that the people that have that toolbar installed have visited. And then we can tie that anonymously to whether they were exposed to a particular branded content campaign or not. And that allows us to get aggregated measurement from the effect of that branded content campaign on their behavior after being exposed.
Just make sure you know what you're measuring ahead of time.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing. People, when you come out of the campaign and you're trying to cobble the numbers together, hopefully you talked at the beginning of the campaign to figure out okay, we really want video views, we really want likes, we really want to sell toilet paper, whatever it is, let's build a campaign that actually delivers on that metric, and then we'll find ways to track it.
Yeah. Building with the end in mind is key. It seems like oftentimes, especially in this space, you get very vague terms that mean different things to different people. I want a lot of buzz. I want something viral.
Which is great.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's great.
Sure.
But it's good to take that and then brief and define and solidify some strong, some hard KPIs to back into.
We rarely get briefed with any. Well, there's always an objective, but there's never a quantifiable number to it.
Yeah, of course not.
Thank God.
Question over here. There was one right over
Oh,
there.
I'm sorry. Go for it.
Do you think that any brand in any industry can create brand evangelism? I think Apple's a perfect example of, they have evangelists. Everybody that seems to have an Apple is an evangelist for the product. And do you think that that can be done in any industry to that level? Or is it just not possible with some products or some brands?
I think it can be, but I think you need to have a great product and you need to have people who actually care about it. Because the reason Apple has so many great evangelists is because they make a great product, they don't try to sugarcoat any of it, and at the end of the day, the people who buy it, they love it. And once you have that, it's like chicken or the egg. Can you make people love your product, or do people need to love your product before they can evangelize? And I would argue that you actually need a product that people love, and then you could build evangelism programs around that. If you try to force people to love it or pay people to love it or anything like that, I think you're going to have a really hard time.
Yeah, and I think part of it is having a product that's differentiated, right, to use that word. So Apple with their ecosystem, with the first to touch and all that, once you start engaging with that and love it, then you're going to be an evangelist. It can be harder in certain products where they're sort of the same, the price point's a little different, the quality's about the same. But for the right product, I think, yeah, certainly you can turn people into evangelists.
Yeah. I think you're talking about degrees, though. I mean, if you're putting Apple on the pinnacle, which I would agree they're up there, you're probably not going to be able to beat that level of evangelism with shampoo. I don't know. It's going to be pretty tough. So you're talking about degrees of evangelism and what's realistic, knowing what you got to work with.
It's like, how important is it in your life?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Basically.
totally.
It's like shampoo for me, not that important.
I think that,
Cottonelle, very important.
But we don't talk about it enough.
Right, yeah.
kind of drafting off of what you were saying, James. It's not, it's got to be great product and great advertising. And I remember my first job, one of my bosses had a great quote. I don't know if it came from him or what, but he was saying, nothing kills a bad product faster than great advertising. And it's true. It's like you drive a bunch of people to something because they think it's amazing. If it doesn't live up to that, everybody knows.
Yeah.
Let's see. I think we might have time for one more if anybody's got any other questions.
I think she's saying no, but.
Yeah.
One more.
All right. Fire away.
You guys either agree or disagree with me, but I think it's a brand that's crappy at it and good at it at the same time. They spend a lot of money on it, Geico. It seems to me that they're good because they create a lot of humor and interesting commercials, but they seem to bounce from Caveman to Geico to paid actors. They're just all across the board. And over the last 15 years of watching their commercials, I've never picked up the phone call. So, what do you think?
I think they do an exceptional job because they have so much money to spend. So it's like we have so much money we have to spend, and we know if we spend this much, we're going to acquire, except for you, X amount of users. And so they have the steady Eddie of the Geico, which they're like running out of gags for, but that's like the consistent thing. And then they still have their 15 minutes will save you, 15 minutes will save you whatever it is.
15% or more.
Thank you. And so they are just using, with all that extra cash, they're like, we need to do one-off campaigns that still tell that story, but are still entertaining and still gets people to, so it's not just background. You still laugh at a Geico ad. So it's Caveman, it's guys singing, whatever it might be. So I think they do an exceptional job of building over time the same message, but they have so much money they need to stir it up.
And I think the key is, right, so whether it's Caveman or the Gecko, that 15 minutes has been consistent throughout.
Yeah.
So I'm actually the opposite boat, right? I got a car and I got Geico because I saw the commercial all the time and I'm like, I'll save some money. But I think they do seem to bounce around, but if you really look at it, that message is exactly the same over 15 years.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Anything to add? All right, I think we'll wrap up. Thanks so much,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone.
Thanks you.
Thank you, guys.